Hello, everybody. It's Alexandra. I'm excited for the show today. It's me flying solo because Dotsy's actually flying on a plane somewhere. So, anyway, I wanted to speak just a little bit about something before we get into the interview with our two really charming, knowledgeable guests. And it's sort of linked actually to the show. I want to discuss some thoughts on the weight loss drugs that have been getting so much attention in the last 6 months. One of them is Ozempic. That's a drug that was approved about 6 years ago for type 2 diabetes. And then there's Wegovy. It's another drug that is made by the exact same company, and it was approved just a couple years ago for weight loss. And essentially, Wegovy has over twice the amount of semaglutide, which is the active ingredient that causes weight loss. But otherwise, they both work pretty much the same way. They're a weekly shot that encourages the release of this hormone that makes you feel full, and it also slows the time that the food takes to get out of the stomach, so you don't end up eating as much and you lose weight. I don't have a weight issue, so it's a little delicate for me to be passing judgment on these drugs or giving you thoughts about these drugs, but I've been extremely critical of my own body over the years, so I really have felt a lot of the pain of living in a body in which I'm not comfortable. So I understand very much why people want to take these drugs to lose weight, but I do have some concerns, but also some positive things to say. So I'm going to discuss the pros first. Now, first of all, these drugs stop food chatter for some people and obsession over food. And I know that I had a lot of that when I was severely restricting food as an anorexic, and it can be extremely all-consuming and make your life very small. You can really waste a lot of your life being too focused on what you're going to or not going to eat today. So I think that's a really positive side effect. Secondly, I don't oppose bariatric surgery, and it does pretty much the same kind of thing as these drugs, where you lose weight steadily, at least in the beginning, no matter what your lifestyle habits are. So if people lose weight, that makes you healthier in itself, physically and certainly maybe even emotionally, because you feel better about yourself. So does it matter if you don't change your lifestyle habits? I mean, there's still a net benefit, right? And if it makes people happy, then who am I to say anything about it? A lot of people are very desperate about losing weight, and they have tried so many ways to lose weight, and they haven't been able to. So if this works, then, more power to them. Now, here's some of the concerns that I have. I worry that the side effects of these drugs, we don't know them, and they might be dangerous. There's already reports of people getting something called gastroparesis, which is when the digestive tract slows down so much that food doesn't leave the stomach at all. And also, the company says that these drugs have to be taken forever or the weight comes back. And wow, that is a big red flag for me. But then again, I take vitamins every day, and so maybe it's fine to take a pill every day to keep some weight off. I mean, I take vitamins every day to stay healthy. Maybe some people take a pill to keep weight off. However, this is my personal story, and I think this is really important. I had a health coaching client come to me because he'd been taking Wegovy, and it had worked. He'd lost 20 pounds, but after about 6 months, I think, or so, he was starting to get hungrier again, and the weight was slowly coming back, and he didn't know what to do. And so he came to me to learn healthy lifestyle habits so he could keep the weight off that he lost. And he wanted to eat better and exercise because he realized that the drug, even though the company said that if you kept taking it forever, the weight would stay off, it wasn't doing that for him. Now, these drugs encourage people to continue to eat unhealthily because they can lose weight without changing their lifestyle. So they might be thinner, but they might not be much healthier, which, like I noticed above, it's really none of my business. If they want to be thin and not that healthy, I mean, who am I to say, right? I spent a long time throwing up, and that's not healthy, trying to be thin. So certainly I am not going to be judgmental about anyone taking a pill. So maybe these drugs are for the people who want to be thinner, but really aren't willing to give up fried food or whatever their favorite foods are. I do worry that they'll be super disappointed when they lose the 15% of their body weight that the drug company says they will lose. But then their body adjusts to the drug and it comes back on, like my client. And because they haven't changed any of their habits, they'll go right back to where they were, and sort of like yo-yo dieting, but you spent hundreds, maybe thousands, because it's really expensive, these drugs, of dollars just to get back to where you were. Now, I'm also, the whole thing about taking a pill, it worries me because it works in one way, but always there's side effects that can be really negative. And it can also be a cycle of spending a lot of money for years and years to stay slim, not even maybe that slim. You lose 15% of your weight, but maybe you want to lose more. And unless you change your lifestyle, then that's not going to happen by the pill alone. Now, some people are critical of drugs or bariatric surgery because it's a, quote, easy way out, but I don't think there's anything wrong with weight loss being easy. I wish weight loss were easier. I just want it to be effective. And ideally, this drug would jumpstart people to feel better about themselves and then maybe adopt to healthy habits. But unfortunately, the literature says that if you stop taking the drug, the weight comes back. I'm not really sure why, frankly. Is it because people just take the drug and don't change their lifestyles? So then, of course, their body goes back to what it was if they stop taking the drug. Or is it because their body becomes dependent on the drug? I really don't know, but that is what I have heard. So that is my view of Ozempic and Wegovy. In a nutshell, I understand why people might want to take these drugs. I like that it makes it easier to lose weight because losing weight often makes people healthier just because they've lost weight. But I worry that these drugs won't be as effective as promised. And these folks who take them will get trapped in a cycle where they'll end up even more desperate and discouraged. So anyway, let us know your thoughts about what I've discussed by leaving a message at switchforgood.org/podcast, and then just scroll down to this orange record button and record your comment. And now let's get on to the show.
I understand why people are confused. Again, the pathophysiology is complicated, but a banana never gave anybody type 2 diabetes. The reason why you're spiking up after eating a banana is not due to the fructose and the fiber in the banana. It's due to the insulin resistance at a cellular level that has developed over multiple years of eating a diet that has been high in saturated fat, high in refined carbohydrates, an excess of calories, not enough physical activity, and that is what led to you becoming intolerant to healthy carbohydrates.
Over 400 million people worldwide have diabetes. It can strike anyone at any age, and it has been steadily increasing in the last few decades. Type 2 diabetes accounts for over 90% of all diagnosed diabetes cases. And if you have pre-diabetes, you have up to 70% likelihood of developing the disease. But while these statistics are alarming, there is good news. Our guests today are registered dietitian Diana Licalzi and exercise physiologist Jose Tejero. Together, they founded Reversing T2D, an online health platform that helps people gain control of their blood sugar through plant-based nutrition, exercise, and mindset. In their new book, The Type 2 Diabetes Revolution, a cookbook and complete guide to managing type 2 diabetes, Diana and Jose help us lower our blood sugar and eliminate or reduce the need for medication if we're taking it. It has over 100 delicious plant-based recipes and tips with something for every palate. So I am so thrilled to have Diana and Jose on the show today to provide their insight into combating this pervasive but preventable malady. Thank you so much, you two, for being on the show.
Thank you for having us here, Alexandra.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We've talked about diabetes on this show quite a bit, but I always think that it's worth, not only because we always have new listeners, but it's always worth just asking a really basic question, because it is the 7th leading cause of death in the United States, and worldwide, it's one of the top 10 causes of death globally. So can you give us a definition of type 2 diabetes and differentiate it, please, from type 1 and type 3?
Great. That's a great question. And I love to start with that question. So diabetes is an umbrella term that basically defines chronically elevated blood sugar levels. Now inside that umbrella, you have different forms of diabetes, like you mentioned. We have type 1 diabetes, type 1.5 diabetes, we have pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and gestational diabetes. There's another one called type 3 diabetes nowadays, but that is more referring to Alzheimer's disease. Now, type 1 and type 1.5 are autoimmune forms of diabetes. That is when your immune cells are attacking the beta cells of the pancreas that produce insulin. And basically, the beta cells die off. You end up with no insulin, no more insulin production, and that in turn raises your blood sugar levels. That's autoimmune conditions. There is not really a lifestyle factor behind the development of type 1 or 1.5. Then you have prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, which, as you mentioned in the introduction, is the large majority of cases. Now, prediabetes and type 2 diabetes are lifestyle diseases. They come to fruition due to our lifestyle factors. Now, it's mostly diet and exercise. Now, unfortunately, we live in a society where we're eating too many calories and not exercising enough. And that is the driving factor behind the root cause of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, which is known as insulin resistance. Now that has been said, you may be asking, okay, what is insulin resistance? What is its root cause? Well, insulin resistance, simply put, is when your cells are not responding properly to the signals of insulin. And insulin, just so everybody knows, is a hormone that acts like a key that opens the door of the cell so glucose can go into the cell. Now, if this key cannot open the door, you can just imagine what happens. Glucose cannot go into the cell, so it stays outside in the bloodstream. And that is a reason why when people living with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, they check their blood sugar through a finger prick or through a CGM, their blood sugar is elevated because insulin never had the opportunity to open the door of the cell. Glucose never went into the cell, so it stayed circulating the bloodstream. And that is insulin resistance. Now, what causes it? That is when we get into the diet and into the lifestyle part of it, but we can dive into that a little bit later.
When we eat a surplus of calories, which is very easily done when we eat a diet that's mainly comprised of refined processed carbohydrates, added sugars, and animal products, which tend to contain a lot of saturated fat. When we eat these foods, they're very palatable, right? They're hyper palatable, and we can tend to consume too much of them, excess calories. And a lot of that time, excess calories leads to excess fat in our body, and it tends to develop in the abdominal area. It's called visceral fat. And that is highly linked to insulin resistance. And as Jose mentioned, insulin resistance is when insulin can't unlock the cells and glucose can't get into our cells. So glucose starts to build up, and over time that leads to prediabetes. And if nothing is done, then that continues, the glucose continues to rise to levels that then are categorized as type 2 diabetes.
Great explanations, both of you. Thank you. So in your book, The Type 2 Diabetes Revolution, and as I said, it's a cookbook and also a guide to help people manage diabetes or manage their life so that they don't get diabetes. You claim that you help the reader get to the root cause of the disease. Is the root cause that excess fat that you're talking about, or is it something else?
Well, the root cause starts with our lifestyle, the lifestyle that we're living. And in American society and now in Western society as a whole, we are living sedentary lifestyles, right? We're not expending enough calories, and we're eating hyperpalatable foods, like Diana mentioned, foods that are too high in refined carbohydrates, too high in saturated fats. And the combination of both of those forms of food makes it super easy to overeat calories. And that is what generates the problem. That is when we start having this tiny fat depositions inside of our muscle cells and inside of our liver cells. They are known as intrahepatocellular lipids in the liver and intramyocellular lipids in our muscles. That is what disrupts this insulin signaling at a cellular level. Now, everything stems from our habits, how much we move, what we eat, and so on. And that is why in our book, we tell people that when you switch to a plant-based whole food lifestyle, you naturally are eating no refined carbohydrates, and you're eating way less saturated fats and fats as a whole. And that is the premise behind the reversal of insulin resistance. When in combination, your entire dietary pattern is low in saturated fats and is high in whole complex carbohydrates that are high on fiber, antioxidants, water, minerals, vitamins, and all the goodness that we know that plant-based diets contain.
Right. We're going to definitely get into the food. I want to do a couple technical questions about how you say that a lot of people are living with pre-diabetes or diabetes and they don't even know it. How do we find out if we have diabetes or are pre-diabetic? And what is the A1C or the tool that we should be looking at to judge our status of whether we are pre-diabetic and diabetic? And I'm assuming, by the way, that pre-diabetic means, hey, you're a little too close to being diabetic. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So
How
that's
do we find out?
Yeah, that's such a great question and such an important thing to bring up, because diabetes can be a very silent disease. Like, it can go unnoticed for years, and it usually takes years to develop, and people don't realize that they have prediabetes or that they're on their way to type 2 diabetes. And that's why they actually did just reduce the age for screening. So it used to be 40 if you had a risk factor for type 2 diabetes. Now they reduced it to 35 because so many people are unaware that they have prediabetes, which again leads to type 2. And the best way to do it is to get your blood sugar checked, right? You could go to your doctor's office, you get your A1C, which is a test that measures the last 3 to 4 months. It's an average test of your blood sugar levels. Or it's very accessible. You can use a glucometer, and you can just do it at home and check your fasting blood sugar level, and you can have more or less of an idea of where your blood sugar is at. However, going to your doctor is going to be more of the standard of care. And so yeah, I would say definitely checking with your doctor to see where you're at, and that way, the sooner you can know, the better chances you have of reversing this illness.
And what's the number you want to be looking at for A1C? Like, I recommend people look at their most recent blood tests. And a lot of people don't save their blood tests. They just listen to their doctors. And I'm like, no, because doctors, their standards are too low for our health. They talk about normal, and normal is not good enough for in the United States of America. Normal means you're going to die of some preventable disease because you were too normal and you ate a normal diet.
Yeah.
So I recommend everybody go and look at their blood tests or get one if they don't have one. What's the A1C number they should be looking at? And do they need to ask their doctor specifically for this test, or does it come in a normal blood panel?
Yeah, so a normal A1C is going to be below 5.7. And then once you get into that pre-diabetes range, it's going to be 5.7 to 6.4%. And then diabetes is going to be 6.5% or above. And so you don't usually just get an A1C test, unfortunately, from your doctor. They usually check your fasting glucose levels. And if they notice something is abnormally high there or above the normal amount, then they will test your A1C to get more of a measure there.
Okay, so there's two numbers here. There's the A1C, which is a separate test, and then there's fasting glucose levels. What should we be looking at there?
For those who are interested, and you don't want to wait until your next physical and you just want to go ahead and check your fasting blood glucose at home, you can do it with a glucometer that you just buy over the counter at a pharmacy. Now, the way to do it is you wake up in the morning, and the first thing that you do is you wash your hands, and before you walk the dog, before you make breakfast, check your fasting blood glucose. Now, the number, ideally, it should be below 100. Okay, that is for healthy levels. Now, you mentioned sometimes it's a little too late, right? When it's already 100, especially because the way that the medical system is set up in the United States, we take action when it's a little too late. So ideally, you should be looking at fasting blood glucose numbers between 80 to 90 or so. Okay, if it's less than that, it shouldn't go below 75 for fasting. Now, between 100 and 126 that is considered pre-diabetes. Okay. And 126 and above, that is considered type 2 diabetes. Now, the units of measurement that I'm using is milligrams per deciliter, because other people around the world use millimolars per liter. It changes. But right now I'm using what we use here in the United States. So what you should be focusing on is being below 100. And if you have 2 or more instances of 100 to 126, that is indications of prediabetes, and 126 and above, type 2 diabetes.
Okay, great. Can we go into some of the factors that contribute to somebody getting diabetes? You mentioned food and exercise. Are there any others like stress and sleep and things like that too? Or is it just basically food and exercise we should be concentrating on? And
yeah, there's quite a few different risk factors that so like we mentioned before, food and physical inactivity. So food mainly being weight. So weight, being overweight or obese is one of the biggest risk factors. Then there's also that fat distribution. So that fat distribution more in your abdominal area, it puts you at a greater risk for diabetes. Of course, family history plays a role too. There is a genetic component for type 2 diabetes. But again, lifestyle really does pull the trigger. You know, your genetics can make you more at risk for it, but you can prevent it with lifestyle in many cases. Also, age is a really big risk factor. So the risk of type 2 diabetes increases with age, especially after 35 years old, which definitely shocks a lot of people. Of course, having prediabetes puts you at a greater risk. And then a big one too is gestational diabetes. So if you had gestational diabetes, if you had diabetes while you were pregnant, you are actually at a much greater risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So those are some of the common ones.
And just I want to add, the reason why the risk of type 2 diabetes increases as we age, it boils down to our body composition. As we age, we usually tend to lose muscle mass and gain fat mass. And that is what puts us at a greater risk of the development of type 2 diabetes. Now, like Diana mentioned, it is multifactorial. Insulin resistance is multifactorial. Multiple things are going to aim towards the development of insulin resistance, such as your diet, your movement patterns, your stress levels. There's a huge connection between how chronically stressed you are and your blood glucose levels, environmental factors. All of that definitely influences the development of insulin resistance.
well, let's start with food because that's the one that seems to be the most confusing to people. I noticed that your book was recommended by Dr. Will Bolshevitz, and he's the fiber king. He's been on our show several times. He wrote the excellent books Fiber Fueled and the Fiber Fueled Cookbook. So congratulations on getting a thumbs up from him.
Thank you.
You talked a lot about refined carbohydrates, but you didn't say carbohydrates. Most people think we just have to avoid carbohydrates if we want to manage our blood sugar. Where does fiber, since Dr. V talks so highly of your book, where does fiber come in here?
Yeah, so fiber is a type of carbohydrate that we actually don't digest and absorb in our main GI tract. We actually ferment it in our colon. But the beauty of fiber is that because we don't digest it, we don't have that enzyme to digest it. It actually has so many health benefits to us, especially with type 2 diabetes. So fiber is found in basically every single plant-based food. It's found in all plant-based food, and it's void. Animal products have zero fiber. So the benefits of fiber, number one, it really helps to control blood sugar. So because you're unable to really absorb and break down fiber, it doesn't cause a spike in blood sugar in a way that other carbohydrates can do. So the way I like to explain it is think of it kind of like a shield, right? It's kind of shielding the absorption of the other nutrients in the food going into your bloodstream. So it really makes things slow down. So if you have high fiber meals, you're going to have less of a blood sugar spike. Second of all, it protects our heart. So fiber is so great at taking cholesterol, lowering triglycerides, and helping us reduce our risk of heart disease. And people with diabetes do face a much greater risk of heart complications. It also really helps us maintain healthy bowel movements, right? It cleans our digestive tract because it goes through our whole GI system. And there it's fermented by the gut bacteria, which also leads to so many great benefits as well. And then lastly, like a huge win for fiber is that it keeps us full and it really helps us maintain a healthy weight. Since it can't be digested and it goes down through our stomach so slowly, we get that sensation of fullness for longer. So you aren't with refined carbs, which lack that fiber. A lot of the times you find yourself hungry very shortly after eating these processed refined carbs. However, if you're eating foods full of fiber, you are going to be satiated for longer and you're not going to be eating as much. Therefore, it helps you maintain a healthy body weight a lot more easily. So we're big fans of fiber.
So are we. So what is the overall, when you talk about sugar spikes, and it sounds like spiking sugar is bad for you, not just in the moment, but maybe long term. Am I hearing you correctly? Why does it matter if there's a spike, et cetera?
That's a great question. So it's very normal to experience a spike, a blood sugar. Let's maybe spike isn't the best word. Let's say a rise in blood sugar after eating carbohydrates. And that is a completely normal physiological response. When we eat carbohydrates, they're broken down into glucose. It's a simple form of carbohydrate. And glucose is then able to enter our bloodstream. And of course, by adding glucose to our bloodstream, glucose is going to go up a little bit, right? And that's when our pancreas receives the signal to release insulin. And then insulin, like we mentioned before, unlocks the cells. The glucose can get out of our bloodstream and into the cells where the cells use it for energy. So it's very normal to experience a rise in blood sugar after eating carbohydrates. What we want to avoid with people who have insulin resistance is they do experience abnormal blood sugar rises or spikes in this case. And it does go, a lot of times it does go beyond the normal levels that we want. The more blood sugar that we have in our bloodstream, the more insulin that needs to be released by our pancreas. And over time, this can be a problem, especially if we're not doing anything to reverse the insulin resistance, because then our pancreas has to continue to work harder and harder and harder, release more and more insulin. And sometimes if nothing is done to prevent this over time, the cells that are producing insulin can burn out and can die. And then that leads to some other major issues, as including yes, Jose, I want to jump in.
Want to piggyback from what you were mentioning. As you can tell, Alexandra, the pathophysiology behind insulin resistance is complicated, right? And that confuses people because when they are already insulin resistant and they eat, let's say, a banana or a potato, which we know are healthy, complex, whole carbohydrates, their blood sugar is going to rise, right? So they put one and one together. They're like, okay, bananas equals spikes, hence bananas are bad. Hence fruits as a whole are bad. And then that is when the mix-up in avoiding all carbohydrates start. They say, oh, all carbohydrates are the evil. I cannot go ahead and eat carbohydrates for the rest of my life. And they start avoiding the healthful carbohydrates, the ones that are full of fiber, like the fruits, the vegetables, the whole grains. And I understand why people are confused. Again, the pathophysiology is complicated, but a banana never gave anybody type 2 diabetes. The reason why you're spiking up after eating a banana is not due to the fructose and the fiber in the banana. It's due to the insulin resistance at a cellular level that has developed over multiple years of eating a diet that has been high in saturated fat, high in refined carbohydrates, an excess of calories, not enough physical activity. And that is what led to you becoming intolerant to healthy carbohydrates, right? So the premise behind our method is to reduce the amount of those unhealthy foods that are making you intolerant to carbohydrates and make you tolerant again by reducing the size of that lipid droplet that is causing insulin resistance. And the way to do it is through, believe it or not, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. But it's hard for people to get over that mental block that all carbohydrates are raising my blood glucose. So this is something that we tell people that join our program, and we mention it in our book. At first, since you are insulin resistant, carbohydrates will spike you up beyond normal levels. That's a completely normal response. But you're going to see that over the weeks, as your insulin sensitivity increases, you are going to become tolerant to carbohydrates again. You're going to eat that banana with no problem, that apple with no problem, the whole grains with no problem. And that is what people tell us. Like, thank you for telling me that I can do this and I can enjoy fruits again. I can enjoy these carbohydrates again. So we have to make that distinction between the bad, the refined carbohydrates, and the good, the whole complex carbohydrates.
Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want. The goal is not to keep sugar out of our system, natural sugars. The goal is to be able to allow our system to use the sugars properly. I hear that sometimes that people feel like, well, I can't eat any sugar. I should go on the carnivore diet or the keto diet if I have diabetes, because that'll keep sugar out of my system and then I won't have any sugar spikes. But what you're saying is that's not the right way to look at it. Let's let your body work properly instead of giving it a Band-Aid.
Exactly.
Talk to me more about these different, the carnivore, the keto, the things that people are so focused on, like, oh no, I can't, like you said, I can't eat fruit, I can't eat grains because I'm diabetic. But no, that's the wrong way to go about it, right?
I would love to answer that question because at least once a week I go on rants against keto on social media. So here's the thing. You get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. The first thing that comes to your mind is, I have to avoid carbohydrates. You Google, what do I eat? And the first thing that pops up is ketogenic diet. And if you want to go the extreme, like the carnivore diet, right? Which are low carbohydrate, high fat, high protein diets in the case of carnivore, or just high fat, low carb in the case of a keto diet. Now, the problem with those diets is that they are not truly making you insulin sensitive, which means that when somebody's on a ketogenic diet, they cannot eat a banana without a gigantic glucose spike. They are still insulin resistant at a physiological level. Now, I'm not even going to get into the long-term complications of eating high amounts of meat, high amounts of saturated fat. That is when we get into the cardiovascular problems and so on. But just focusing on blood glucose responses, when you are trying to reverse type 2 diabetes, you should focus on being insulin sensitive in a glucose challenged state, which means that if you are not able to process carbohydrates correctly on a glucose challenged state, then you have not reversed this condition. And that is something that a ketogenic diet doesn't allow you to do. But unfortunately, people still go into it. And then 3 months down the line, they go to the doctor and their A1C is down. Their fasting blood glucose is down. And on paper, clearly they don't have type 2 diabetes. So the doctor is like, continue doing what you're doing. I don't care what it is. You are doing great. They go back home. They're like, I have reversed my type 2 diabetes. Let me go ahead and eat a pint of ice cream and a banana or something. They do that and their blood glucose skyrockets. That tells them that they have not reversed the root cause of this condition. And that is unfortunate. When you can go the opposite side, high carbohydrate, the good kind, low saturated fat, low fat as a whole, which is a plant-based whole food diet, basically, and enjoy carbohydrates again. Be tolerant to these carbohydrates again, and just see normal rises in your blood glucose, like Diana mentioned, instead of seeing gigantic spikes.
Yeah. And just to add to that too, I think a lot of people are so focused on the immediate responses in their blood sugar. So, of course, eating low carb and carnivore, you're not going to see those blood sugar spikes, right? When you cut out all those carbohydrates, they're a little too focused on that, on the immediate result, and aren't looking at the bigger picture of what happens if you eat this way long term, or if you were to switch your diet over to more of a whole food plant-based diet. What are the implications? What are the results long term? And that's what I think people need to start shifting their focus. Stop focusing on that short-term blood sugar response and see what is going to happen long term. And when you look at the research shows both sides. It shows when you eat a diet that's high in red meat, red processed meats, it increases your risk of type 2 diabetes. And when you eat a diet that's more focused on whole foods, plant-based foods, it actually decreases your risk. Not only decreases your risk, but it helps decrease complications associated with type 2 diabetes. It helps you manage type 2 diabetes more. It helps you decrease your blood sugar long-term, your A1C long-term. And there was actually just a study that came out. I think we did a rant on this as well. It was researchers from Harvard School of Public Health, and they actually looked at a pretty big cohort, and they found that people who ate more servings of red meat, including processed and unprocessed, had a much greater risk of type 2 diabetes. And it started with just an extra 2 servings of meat a week compared to those who ate fewer. And then they also found the opposite was true, that when these people replaced a serving of red meat with a plant-based protein like a legume or even a nut, their risk decreased significantly.
Now, is this because you mentioned earlier that the fat droplets in the muscles are unable to accept here insulin's knocking on the door to let the glucose in? Is that why meat is not good for you? And is it tell me what's going on? Because a lot of people on keto, I hear, at least in the beginning, they will lose weight. And I also heard you say that if you lose body fat, that makes you more insulin sensitive. What's going on that the protein you recommend is plant-based and not animal?
Now, what we know is that they definitely are higher in saturated fat. If you look at a ribeye and you compare it to 2 cups of beans, the saturated fat on both are going to be astronomically different. So what we know is that saturated fat is increasing your levels of insulin resistance. And it's not just a saturated fat, unfortunately. I have to be clear and honest about this. It's the combination of saturated fat and refined carbohydrates that develop this insulin resistance. And most people are not just eating a ribeye and that's it. Like, you're pairing it up with potatoes. You're pairing it up with mashed potatoes that are high in butter, with the rest of your diet that could also include some cereals and refined carbohydrates and so on. So you have to look at the entirety of your diet. You cannot just look at, okay, red meat gives us type 2 diabetes. It's truly the whole dietary pattern. So on a whole food plant-based diet, you're reducing your saturated fat immediately. You are reducing your overall fat content immediately, and you are completely void of refined carbohydrates. And that in turn allows you to consume less calories and more nutrients per bite of food that you take. And that also leads to the weight gain, to the weight loss that people see on a plant-based diet and so on. Can people lose weight on a carnivore diet? Absolutely. And are they improving their health by losing weight? Absolutely. Okay. Like, there's no denying that. But you also have to look at what are they exchanging in exchange of weight loss? What else? What are they putting at risk for increasing the consumption of red meat? So again, it's not black or white. There's so much gray area on here, and it's all about your dietary pattern as a whole. We cannot blame just one food for the development of type 2 diabetes.
A lot of the times people see weight loss when they switch their dietary pattern, because some of the main contributors of excess calories in the diet are going to be refined carbohydrates, fat, processed foods. And when you're switching your dietary pattern to whether that's a plant-based a plant-based diet or a low carb diet, you're usually taking something away. So when you switch over to a keto or low carb, you're removing all carbs, but you are removing refined carbohydrates, which is contributing a ton of calories. So just by changing your dietary pattern, and by eliminating one of those food groups that causes excess calories, you are probably going to see some weight loss. And like Jose said, weight loss is going to result in, it's going to help reverse some insulin resistance. So yes, that is a really great benefit. I think it's even just reducing your body weight 5 to 10% can have so many great positive outcomes. And so if you are someone who finds that low carb works better for you and you're able to maintain that in the long term, we're not going to tell you not to do that, right? Like if you can lose weight and maintain that kind of a dietary pattern, okay, good for you, and you can stick with it. But it's not something that we're going to recommend, because even the American Diabetes Association says that low carb diets really aren't sustainable in the long run. And for you to be successful with reversing insulin resistance, you want to be able to have a healthy body weight long term. So that's why we don't recommend those low carb diets, because again, they're just hard to maintain.
I want to clarify, Jose, you said potato. You said, well, the person eating the meat is also eating a potato. And so, but potatoes are okay, right?
They are totally okay. Yes. I mean, they're a whole food. They are plant-based. They check all the boxes for our method. Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because we love potatoes, but potatoes are very much maligned. Like a lot of diabetics wouldn't touch them.
Right.
It's
Due
when
to
you
the
put
high starch content of potatoes that they're going to see a spike. But again, it's not the fault of the potato. It's the fault of the insulin resistance. As a matter of fact, Dr. McDougall, I believe, he has a book called The Starch Solution, right? Like you are able to reverse insulin resistance by eating mostly potatoes. So what does that tell you? The potato was never at fault. The fault is, again, saturated fat intake, high consumption of refined carbohydrates, high consumption of calories as a whole. So yeah, you can even reverse type 2 diabetes just by focusing on potatoes alone.
And I think potatoes do get a lot of hate because of their glycemic index. Like they tend to be a little bit higher in the glycemic index, meaning they can lead to your blood sugar having a little bit of an increase, a higher increase compared to other foods. So I think there is a little bit of, they get a bad rep because of that. But there are really cool little techniques that you can do to lower the glycemic index of potatoes. And one of them is boiling them and then cooling them. And that act of just boiling, then cooling, lowers the glycemic index, and it can actually be more favorable for your blood sugar levels.
So within whole food, plant-based, it sounds like there are some foods that you might recommend over others, or is it basically, are there some that are on the, like carrots? I had a friend, oh my God, I almost died. He's about 40 pounds overweight, and he doesn't eat, in my opinion, healthy, eats a lot of cheese and he eats some meat and white bread. And he said, well, I don't eat carrots because they raise your blood sugar. And I'm like, eat carrots? I think it's like, but we do that, especially when it's something like carrots and not chocolate, right? It's like easy to say, I'm not going to eat carrots.
Yeah.
So are there some foods that you might say that are whole foods? You've included, you're okay with fruit, but maybe not fruit juice, or maybe are there some fruits you're less hot on, or?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I would say if you're someone who is switching over to a whole food plant-based diet, you have type 2 diabetes, and you're seeing a lot of blood sugar spikes, like Jose had said, when you're making that switch, you can see a lot in the beginning as you tackle that insulin resistance. So we like to tell people in our program to, during those 2 weeks, 3 weeks, as you really reverse insulin resistance, you can focus more on lower glycemic foods. So these are going to be a little bit more favorable for your blood sugar. But again, like for fruit, that's going to be berries are really great low glycemic fruit to focus on. Ones that are going to be a little bit higher is going to be like more of those tropical fruits like pineapple, when it comes to vegetables, really any non-starchy vegetable is going to be so great for your overall health, and it's just going to be beneficial for your blood sugar. There are certain grains that have a slightly lower glycemic index, like, barley tends to be a good one. People often are shocked by this one, but even whole wheat pasta is actually lower on the glycemic index. So just making that switch can be really beneficial. So we tell people to do that, focus more maybe while you're reversing insulin resistance, focus maybe more on those low glycemic carbs.
And to answer your question, Alexandra, about juicing, when you extract all the juice from the fruit, you're also removing the fiber, which, like Diana mentioned at the beginning, the fiber helps helps slow down the absorption of glucose into the bloodstream. So without that fiber, you're also definitely going to see a higher spike. And we definitely don't recommend juicing at the very beginning of a transition to the plant-based whole food diet. You're definitely going to see higher spikes like that.
So before we get, I want to talk about exercise, but I have one last question about food, or it's not really a food, but diet soda versus soda. You hear a lot about soda contributing maybe to diabetes in our culture. So a lot of people switch to diet soda. Tell us about those things that quote unquote don't spike our insulin, like those fake sugars and stuff. Is that a good alternative, or should we just avoid them completely?
So this is where I always say, like, nutrition is such a case by case, and everything's relative, right? So if you're someone who drinks a ton of soda or a lot of sugary sweetened beverages, there is a lot of research that shows this can lead to weight gain, can lead to type 2 diabetes. So if you're someone who is drinking a lot and you're trying to get off of regular soda, and you're okay with some of these diet alternatives, then you absolutely have that in place of soda, because we want to get you to reduce your sugar consumption. So yes, if you're someone who doesn't drink diet soda, we wouldn't tell you to start, of course. Like, there's also, I wouldn't say there's no health benefits associated with drinking these diet drinks, of course. But in terms of diabetes and weight management, if you're okay switching to the diet option, absolutely do it. The ultimate goal is to, of course, drink water and get you drinking more of those water or sparkling beverages like Spindrift, LaCroix, that are so popular. That I think that's kind of like the gold standard. But I think diet sodas can be a good stepping stone.
Awesome. And Dr. B doesn't like diet soda, though, because it ruins your microbiome, all those fake sugars. But yes, that's a terrific way. It sounds like you understand that people have a hard time giving up some things. And so this is a step down, or a step up, I guess, to a healthier life if you can transition off the sugary sodas. Okay. So some questions about exercise. You have a degree in exercise science, Jose. Why does exercise help with diabetes? Why is it such an important component?
Why? Okay, so exercise and physical movement as a whole is one of the best things that you can do to reverse insulin resistance and to stay insulin sensitive. Why? Because our muscles, our skeletal muscles, are the most metabolically active organ in our bodies as long as we activate it. So what does metabolically active mean? That means that it uses the highest amount of glucose, even at rest. But when you activate them, they become glucose vacuums. They start sucking up all of that glucose from the bloodstream because they need it for energy. So you basically supercharge the suctioning power of your vacuum by moving those muscles. Now, there's different types of exercise. You have cardiovascular exercise, which is swimming, biking, running, dancing, moving your body by elevating your heart rate. But then you also have resistance training, which that is performing movement against the force of gravity or against resistance bands or using, or lifting weights. So you have cardiovascular and resistance. If you combine both of them, then you're going to have synergistic effects. You're going to get all of that glucose clearance from burning glucose through cardiovascular training, but you're also going to gain more muscle mass by performing resistance training. So the more muscle that you have, you can just think about it as a bigger engine that your vacuum has. So both in combination are fantastic for you.
And what do you recommend to someone who comes to you and what's the ratio of cardio to resistance training, if there is one, that you recommend?
Yeah. So when people come to us, like Diana said, everybody's is very individual. So we meet them where they at. And most people can walk. I'm saying most, not all. So for somebody that can walk, our first recommendation would be to start walking after meals. There is a lot of research showing that when you go on a 15 to 20-minute walk after breakfast, after lunch, after dinner, you see a much better fasting blood glucose 3 months down the line by sticking to this exercise regimen, right? And your A1C also improves. Why, you may ask, is because if you think about it, when right after we eat, our blood glucose levels are at its highest, right? We just ate some carbohydrates, we just ate some food, our blood glucose is rising. How do we blunt that blood sugar spike? How do we prevent from it getting higher and higher? We use it up. We have to use that energy. So you go on a walk, you move those muscles, you switch on your vacuum, and then you start sucking up all of that glucose that blunts the glucose spike. That is why it's fantastic for you. So that is the first thing that we recommend to people. Now, when it comes to resistance training, what I give our clients is a workout composed of resistance bands, because most people want to start at level 1, then we can go ahead and graduate to free weights. But resistance bands 3 to 4 times a week, with a routine that touches your upper body and your lower body, maybe around 5 exercises and then 3 sets per exercise. That would be my number 1 recommendation, 3 to 4 times per week. And of course, with your walking after meals every single day of the week.
Tell me a bit about that walking. Should it be brisk, or can it be if you bring your dog and your dog's a sniffer, is that good enough?
So what the research paper that I read showed is that just a normal paced walk. So it could be walking your dog. It could be a walk around the park, talking to your friend. You don't have to increase the intensity to really get the benefits of moving your body. Now, of course, the higher the intensity up to a certain point, let me be clear, the better that it's going to be for your cardiovascular system as a whole. So if you want to go ahead and graduate from this after meal walks, you can go ahead and start jogging. You can go ahead and start biking, and you're going to increase your heart rate for longer periods of time. That is going to strengthen your cardiovascular system. That is going to strengthen your glucose vacuum suctioning power. That's going to overall benefit your overall health. Also, it creates a negative caloric balance, because the more exercise that you do, the more calories that you are going to burn. As a matter of fact, I just did an Ironman a couple months ago, and I burned 10,000 calories. 10,000 calories in one day. That is crazy. Well, of course, I don't recommend anybody to burn 10,000 calories in a day, but the more exercise that you do, the more of a negative caloric balance that you're going to create. And in turn, that leads to weight loss. And weight loss increases your insulin sensitivity.
Thank you for that, for those first few steps for someone who's exercising. Now, let's say somebody comes to you and they're pre-diabetic, or they are just realize they have diabetes. What are the first couple steps? Because it can be really overwhelming, just terrifying. And so what are the first couple steps you recommend someone do the first few weeks, and then as they graduate, something else, so that they can get a handle on their health?
The first 3 things we kind of have them do is figure out their why. Like, what is the motivation behind wanting to make changes, lifestyle changes? Because I think figuring out your why is what's going to keep you motivated. And when you're trying to change lifestyle factors, it can be very easy to fall off the wagon and fall off track. And by figuring out your why, figuring out that internal motivation, it's really going to help to keep you on track and keep you focused. So that's kind of the number 1 thing we have people do, is figure out your why. Second, when it comes to diet, we have people focus on changing just 1 meal at a time. I think slow and steady tends to work a lot better for some people, whereas other people like to go full in. And so we do offer both kind of approaches for people. Some people like to just stick with one meal at a time. So we first say, okay, how can we make changes to your breakfast? Or how can we make some changes to your lunch? What can we swap here? What can we add? A lot of times we like to add, we help people figure out what foods they can add so it doesn't seem like they're just restricting or limiting foods. It's like, how can we add some more starchy vegetables? Or how can we add some low glycemic fruit? And then when it comes to exercise part, we always have people start with the walking too after meals, so that it doesn't seem overwhelming. So we kind of focus on those three things: figuring out your why, what foods can you add, or what meal can you change, and then can you get active after some of your meals.
And I just want to mention, most of the time, that why is not, I want to lower my blood sugar. I want to get a better A1C. No, that why is, I want to be here to see my kids grow up. I want to be here to see my kids have kids. I want to be an active grandparent. Those are the big whys that truly drive you to keep moving forward on moments where you may have some weakness, right? Or moments where like you might want to give up, right? Because at some point, it might be a little bit tough for people to change their lifestyles. But if you go back to that why, and that why is big and it's always chasing you, we tell people, go ahead and put it behind your door, put it in your mirror, put it next to your computer. So you're constantly reminded about the reason why you're doing this.
And do you have a success story among your clients that you'd like to share with us that might inspire listeners and viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start because I already know who came to my mind. And we had somebody join, I think it was last year. It was a farmer from Canada. So very meat heavy diet, lots of dairy in his diet. And when he found us, he was like, Jose, truly, I'm never going to to eat plant-based. I'm not gonna eat salads. That's not the way that I want to do it.
They
Right.
always think it's salads. It's not.
Yeah, they always, that's the thing. They
Always.
always think it's salads. And I'm like, it's way more than that, trust me. But I told him, there's an issue at hand. You have three medications: high cholesterol, for high blood glucose, and for high blood glucose, high cholesterol, and hypertension. And he was on another one to protect his kidneys. So four medications. His A1C was 12.6. So very, very out of control. I told him, there's a problem at hand. We need to tackle it. We have the solution. Please promise me that you can do this for the next 3 months. And his wife was there. His wife was like, I promise you that he will do it.
And just to note that his A1C is 12 with the medications, or was it?
He had just started medications because of the A1C being 12. So he was put on all of these medications, and he was like, how did this happen to me? Like, I'm on all of these medications. My doctor just told me that I have type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, hypertension. My kidneys are going to fail. He was scared. So I told him, there's a solution. You can do it. He had the support of his wife, of course, and that was fantastic. So he started the program, and he was the most compliant person ever, sending us pictures every single day for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, the delicious plant-based meals that his wife was making and he was making. I kid you not, a month down the line, he tells me, I went to see another doctor because I'm feeling way better, and I got my fasting blood glucose, and it's back to non-diabetic levels, and within 1 month. So that doctor took him off medications because he was being overly medicated. And I was like, all right, well, that's great that your doctor did that for you, but let's see what happens 3 months down the line, because we truly need to see the difference in A1Cs and so on. We need to see if it was just a medication helping you out and so on, right? And he was like, all right, fair. So he continued doing it. And 3 months down the line, he redid all of his labs, everything back to normal, no more medications. He looked way better. He looked energized. We helped him with exercise, with diet, with everything. And that truly made me extremely happy. So that is one of the clients that really come to my mind every now and then, I would say, because it was a fantastic story.
That's wonderful. Well, there are some before and after stories on your website that are very inspirational. Are there any, you've clarified a lot about diabetes, so we might have already covered them, but are there some myths that you'd like to bust about this disease?
I think such a common myth is that sugar causes diabetes, right? Everyone thinks that. Even my own husband still doesn't understand that it's not sugar. Um, and yes, sugar does not cause it. It's the overconsumption of calories. And again, what really causes us to overconsume calories, it's going to be hyperpalatable foods, which are going to be really a lot of refined carbohydrates, fatty foods like animal products, which are going to be high in saturated fat. So that's a big one.
I would say another one, and I think this is going to give hope to some people, is that you can reverse the root cause of type 2 diabetes. You can reverse insulin resistance. And a lot of people, when they get diagnosed, their world like caves, right? They are like, oh, I'm going to have type 2 diabetes forever. This is the disease that they told me that is chronic and progressive and that I'm going to be on medications forever. Take a deep breath. You can reverse insulin resistance. You can do it. There's a way to do it. There is an approach that is just healthful for your overall health. And that is the one that we recommend, a plant predominant diet, exercising more. And that is truly going to make you more insulin sensitive.
And there's so many other benefits to
So
eating healthily and exercising, and you just end up feeling better and looking better.
Yeah.
And your mood is better too. Emotionally, you are more positive. So it has so many benefits. And then your blood sugar,
your blood sugar gets better. Cherry on top.
So tell us about the programs you offer. You have a 1-hour online workshop that helps people understand about how to maintain their blood sugar also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell us about how people can learn from you, the various ways, your Instagram page, et cetera, and of course, where to get your book.
Yeah, so we are Type 2 Diabetes Revolution on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, on Facebook. We're everywhere. Type 2 Diabetes Revolution. And we post a ton of free educational content. Jose and I both went into this wanting to help as many people as we could. For me, type 2 diabetes runs in my family, and I've seen many of my family members struggle with it. So it's something that I wanted to be able to educate people a lot on this issue. And so we offer a ton of free resources too. We have a free starter guide and meal plan. We have a free workshop that you can watch. And then we also have, if you want more of a structured program and you want more support, we have our 10-week signature program where you can join, and then you get access to tons of educational modules, weekly meal plans, access to a community forum, and then you also have the opportunity to message Jose and I 24/7. And then our book, we just released our book. We wanted to be able to continue to reach more people, not just through social media. And so we wrote this book so that we can continue to expand our reach. Our book contains a whole guide. So the first 6 chapters is all about learning about type 2 diabetes and how and why a predominantly plant-based diet works so well to tackle insulin resistance and how it can reverse it. And included is also a free 4-week meal plan in there with recipes from the book. We have over 100 plant-based recipes that are all very well balanced, high in fiber, adequate protein. And that book is available wherever books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Target, Walmart, wherever books are sold, you can find it. It's called the Type 2 Diabetes Revolution.
And I just want to mention that I just finished translating the book into Spanish. So our publisher asked us, hey, let's go ahead and help people from Latin American countries as well as Spanish-speaking countries. So since I'm Peruvian and Diana is from Puerto Rico, let's go ahead and translate the book into Spanish. And it's going to be released next year. And we're super excited to spread the word even wider and further now.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. It's a huge endeavor to write a book and get it published. And also, thank you for all the work you're doing, helping so many people. You have a lot of followers on social media. So there's a lot of people who recognize that they need your help. And you really helped a lot of our listeners and viewers today. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alexandra, for having us. It was a blast.
Thank you so much.